and in the media that the offender was portraying himself as a cop. John Douglas strongly agreed with that. He felt that that was a way to implement fear, but then also some sort of reassurance to lure these women in his car. This person was not worried about being caught whatsoever. He most likely lived within the area. He was doing all of his um, scouting and searching for his victims within the area. He was killing them right there within the area, and he was burying them right there in the area. And that insinuated that he probably lived in the area. So he was mobile, he was very comfortable, he prowled at night, and did not want to make himself too obvious. He didn't want to get caught, so he fit in really well and just seemed to be somebody, just a regular guy walking around. And there was nothing too telling about him to point him out. He probably drove a regular vehicle. It was assumed that it wasn't taken care of too well, but that it was probably a four-door car, a truck, or a van. Nothing that had two doors in it. Some sort of bigger vehicle, and not a two-door car by any means. Um, that this person was also not seeking recognition, that he had a purpose in what he was doing because it was just prostitutes, that it was mission oriented, and that he felt that he was probably doing a service to the community of some sort. So he felt no remorse whatsoever for it, and he felt that he was doing something good, and he wasn't seeking recognition for it by any means. He probably had a criminal history or a psychological history. He was probably raised in a broken home of that of a single parent, and it was assumed that it would be his mother, and maybe that's where these tendencies and anger came from towards women, that he also probably had a problem with authority and would lash out. So maybe he felt burdened by women, was embarrassed by women, and there was definitely a deep rooted cause into this hatred that he had for women. And another reason was it was assumed that he probably couldn't pick up women that well himself. So for him to seek out prostitutes was a lot easier for him. They were more vulnerable. And then once he was able to obtain a prostitute in his vehicle or whatever it may be, that the fact that they had some sort of authority because they demanded money for sex or services, that angered him even more, that the female had authority, and then he was able to carry out his actions of what he thought was right. And that is where the John Douglas stated that he did not feel remorse because of those feelings, that he quote unquote was mentally comfortable killing them because of all of these underlying feelings. So that was definitely pretty detailed into the reasoning and the psychological background into this human as to why he was doing such horrific things. And for a more physical profile, he stated that he was outdoorsman, of average height and weight, Caucasian, that he was probably not very neat, and he was a drinker and a smoker. He wasn't going to stop until he got caught. And just like other serial killers, that he probably collects newspaper clippings and any articles on the female that were left behind, or that could be of another form of a trophy for him. And then it also was suggested that he gave these items away to women that were in his life. So if it was a necklace that he had found on one of his victims, he would give it to his mother or his wife or his girlfriend, which would be another reminder of what he had accomplished in his eyes, some sort of trophy where he could visualize it and not go back to the sites. And this also to me showed that he did not want to be recognized whatsoever, that he was able to recognize and feel that satisfaction within himself and these things that he was collecting. He didn't need to gain any of that from the media or from the police, that this truly was something that he felt that he needed to do, and he didn't want anybody to know about it. The way that psychology also played a role in this was their tactics then that they had come up with to try and obtain the murderer. They suggested, all of their tactics were media-based suggestions, and one of them was to give gravesite locations of the victims in hopes that the murderer would want to come back to that site, visit that site, maybe start talking to people, make himself more well known, and police could investigate that the scene of, or the site of the graveyard a little bit more, and see if they could pick up on somebody that they have seen before, or if it was a suspect that they had already had was continuously visiting these grave sites. They also suggested to put a glorified cop in the media, or some brilliant investigator, and build him up, and that it would be something very important and give the community hope for. And by doing this, they also felt that he would come forward wanting to give information and want to talk to him. And another tactic that they wanted to try was to put a psychologist in the media and have the psychologist paint a picture of the perpetrator being the victim, in hopes also that he would put himself out there, come to that psychologist, and look for comfort in some sort of way, and end up giving himself up through dialogue with any of these authorities. That is where I definitely saw psychology play a huge role in this, was in their profile. And I believe that they did a really good job at that, because in the end he really did fit the profile. They also called in Bob Keppel, who's a criminal profiler, and right away he saw many holes in this investigation. Right off of the bat, he noticed that their first tactic or approach in the investigation was talking to the pimps and the prostitutes, and he immediately noticed that they had no method into talking to them. They were just talking to them to see if that they could get information. So right away you just felt it was very unorganized, and they didn't, the end game or the end goal within talking to the pimps and prostitutes was very unclear. So he was upset that there was no method. And then he was also bothered by, or noticed right away, that the task force was spending so much time with just the area of the Green River, and they were not connecting other murder cases that were happening around the same time that were deaths by strangulation if they were not in the Green River. So in his eyes, for them to not identify those or put them within the caseload that went with the Green River killer, it didn't make any sense for him to exclude these. And he went back himself and went over the murder cases for the last year, and immediately found some telling cases that were overlooked just because the bodies weren't located in the Green River. One of them that specifically stuck out again had one of the ritual signs on it, and it was a pyramid shaped hunk of meat on top of the victim's hand. The victim was found outdoors. She was strangled to death. She had a bag over her head, her hands laid over her chest with a wine bottle in between them. There was fish placed around her in various and odd positions, and then there was that hunk of meat, I think it was sausage, that was formed into a pyramid shape, and it was placed on top of her hands. So again, this was another reoccurring sign. This person was leaving their mark, and the way that she was laying there on her back face up also was a telling sign to Keppel that the perpetrator was definitely